Hey guys, Aaron here with another fountain pen review. And today I want to review the pen in front of you. You guys saw a little bit of it in my last review. I kind of showed it and asked some of you to tell me what kind of pen it was if you saw that part of the review. Wayne, you did obviously tell us what pen it was in the comment section of our last video. And this is a pen that I have been very interested in owning for quite some time, really since I started collecting fountain pens. And I just never, my top three vintage pens that I wanted to own were Waterman fountain pen, and I own a few of those now. Parker Vacuumatics, Parker pens in general, especially vintage ones, but Vacuumatic in particular, and then Eversharp, in really no particular order. And I have to say, I am happy that I own this pen. I actually have another one that I've already gotten that I'll show real quick that is in need of some restoration that I'll be working on throughout my videos. And at some point, I'll do a review on that one. But this is a really cool pen. And I do want to talk a little bit about the history of the pen and kind of talk about the pen itself. And in order to do so, I'm not going to go all the way back to the start of Wall Eversharp as a company, but just mainly about how this pen originated. So the pen was launched in 1941, and the company was really looking for a pen that was going to be strikingly modern in appearance. They were really going for an aesthetic viewpoint for the consumer. One really cool note about the pen is that it was actually designed by a industrial designer that was responsible for designing locomotives. And his name was Henry Dreyfuss. And if you go to look at a locomotive, for instance, go look at a train of that time period, you'll notice that the cap especially really resembles some of his designs. He really took kind of that idea of his streamlined locomotives and kind of introduced that and made this pen a streamlined, tapered design. So it's very interesting. There's actually some really cool articles out there about Mr. Dreyfuss and a lot of the things that he was responsible for engineering, and a very talented man. So one thing about the pen is, when you look at the pen, it looks futuristic. I mean, I would think if I was someone of that time period and I saw this pen come out on the market, it looks so much different than a lot of the other pens on the market, obviously. So they were going for a futuristic design. But one thing about the pen is it's relatively ordinary as far as the way it works, the internal workings. It is a lever filler, so there's nothing super special about that. It's not a vacuum filler or anything like that, for instance. It's just a simple lever filler. But one thing that was different about the internal workings of it is it does have a breather tube that supposedly was supposed to make the pen flight proof. So one of the downsides to the breather tube, however, is that it does take roughly about 5 cycles, or at least that is what it states. If you were to buy this pen in 1941, for instance, it would tell you it takes about 5 cycles of the lever to obtain a complete fill. Now it uses an internal rubber sac, just like all your other lever filler pens. There's nothing special there, but there's a breather tube that runs, for this pen in particular, the breather tube literally runs almost the entire length of the sac. Now there was 2 different types of breather tubes that they used. There was this one that runs the complete length, and then I could be wrong on the time period, but I think the earlier models had a different type of breather tube that had a curvature to it and only came up to the right past the section opening. So those were 2 different designs as far as using the breather tube. One of really probably the best features, besides the overall aesthetics of an Eversharp, is their nibs. I think their nibs are probably very diversified in the sense that they offered a wide range from accounting nibs with like a nail-like type stiffness, but that you could write really, really fine writing, to italic nibs with really interesting flex. This pen I have here, and I'll show you guys in the writing sample, it actually has some moderate flex to it, which I think is really interesting. And then the other thing about it is a lot of you have, if I'm not mistaken, 4 different nib designs that, they change the nibs up throughout the years, just like all other vintage pens. They changed up the nibs throughout the years, and there's 4 different nib designs. And I think that's also something else that's kind of interesting. They changed the nibs, and I think the nibs themselves have a kind of an interesting look to it as far as the design on the nib. Now, that's a lot of the good with the pen. I mean, I think there's a lot of cool things about this pen. The nib, the way it looks, it's really aesthetically striking. It came in a multitude of different materials, but an issue with the pen. So one really common issue for the Skylines, at the beginning of the 40s, plastic technology was going through really a revolutionary type change. They were starting to use polystyrene, which is kind of like an injection molded process. And really, they were using that to replace celluloid materials that was generally used in a lot of fountain pens before. So obviously, one benefit of the plastic is that it could be molded and it did not require machining, and it did not have to be finished by hand. So there were a lot of benefits to Eversharp, or really any company utilizing that process. The only unfortunate downside is that it proved to be somewhat disastrous for Eversharp in the long run, because the longevity of the pens, for instance, especially the earlier lines, were notorious for shrinkage, discoloration, and then overall deterioration. And that's why when you hear a lot of fountain pen restorers, a lot of people that collect fountain pens and specifically Skylines, you hear them talk about the sections and the barrels being very brittle, and that you have to be very aware of not creating too much friction or anything like that when you're trying to put the barrel and section back together, for instance, and even just taking it apart. I actually watched one video reviewer that said he went through like 12 pens trying to restore them, and he literally broke, for different reasons, 12 different Skylines. Like, I could not imagine that. That would not only be frustrating, I'm not gonna lie, I'd probably give up. Now, he of course said that because of that, it was like a mission for him to restore one Eversharp Skyline. Now, luckily, I have not had any issues with this pen restoring it. Everything was perfect. I have noticed this pen, for instance, someone shellacked the section and barrel, which it is a friction fit. So, and I get shellacking may be a benefit. I did not do this one. It doesn't move around at all. It works perfect. So, that would be one issue to look for if you're ever getting one of these and it requires you to change out the sack at any point or do any type of maintenance. Just be really aware of that. Also, I'm sure it would probably be fine to put inside of a ultrasonic cleaner if you were trying to clean out the barrel to restore it. However, I did not do that, and I would not feel comfortable doing that. Now, these pens were offered in so many different variations of colors. The cap, so many different variations. Obviously, you see this one. This, I think, is the either the honey gold or the honey red cap. There was literally, I think, 11 different barrel colors and 12 different cap colors. And I mean, if you look online for this pen, there's so many different wide ranges on this pen. So really, that's about as much as I'm going to tell you guys about the pen in general in this video. But it is just a striking pen. So now really talking about this pen specifically. So when you look at the top of the cap here, you'll notice that it has probably one of the most interesting clip designs I've ever seen. The clip definitely is springy. It works well. It goes inside shirt pockets and out of shirt pockets very well. And it's actually interesting because this whole finial screws off, and the way this attaches, so you have a kind of like a riveted attachment here, and then you have two prongs back here. And you can completely disassemble this clip from everything. So you could clean up this finial, for instance, and also clean if you needed to polish any of these pieces here. Now, one thing is you want to be really careful because you can easily break the little clips that are back here. I will put in the description a link on from Richard Bender's website on just restoring this pen, because I think it's interesting. Definitely, it's a good read if you're interested. As far as the cap here, this is obviously the gold-filled cap. It's got these textured lines on it. It's really an interesting cap for me. If you look at the top of the cap, it says Eversharp Skyline, and then you've got patent made in the USA. You've got your double check mark, which, if I'm not mistaken, the double check mark was part of their lifetime warranty, kind of like with Schaefer, you have your white dots. With Parker, you had your blue diamond, things like that. Then you have Eversharp on the clip. And then at the bottom of the cap, if I'm reading it right, it says 1/10, 14KY GF. And I haven't done research to find out what exactly that means. At some point I will. Then moving down the barrel, obviously you can tell this is a blue barrel with a blue finial. You've got your lever right here. Now you'll notice, and one thing that these pins are very common for is plating on the lever. And the reason for that is when you post this pen, because of it having a tapered barrel, the cap posts over the lever. And that was a little bit of a design flaw in the sense that over time, the cap winds up causing plating on the lever. And you'll see this pen has it really bad. So, that was another little bit of a design flaw. Having this really interesting tapered barrel is an awesome thing, but when you post it, it can create some problems. So this pen, in order to take off the cap, there's one. So about 1 1/4 turn in order to take off the cap. And I'll show you guys when you post, for instance. There you can see it. It literally almost covers the entire lever. Now, it does post securely. Now, this pen, when I post it, it does, to me, kind of throw off the balance a little bit because this cap is much heavier. The other cap over there with that kind of celluloid type material, it's much lighter, so it probably wouldn't throw off the balance of the pen. Now, working your way down the barrel towards the section, you'll notice that it tapers back down, which allows space for that cap to kind of make that streamlined look into the barrel. You've got your section threads, which are not sharp at all. They're pretty shallow. And one thing that's nice is this pen has a little bit bigger section, comparatively speaking, to some of the other vintage pens around that time period. For instance, a lot of my Parker Vacuumatics that I have that are from the 40s have much smaller sections. They're not as elongated as this one. So, of course, it tapers down just slightly and then flares out at the end. And then you see that really awesome nib. So you'll notice that it has Eversharp kind of in a banner down the middle. Back here in the nib, you see 14K, and then you see Made in USA on the bottom. There's your breather hole, and it kind of has that eyedrop type shape. And it's just a cool looking pen. And then on the back side, you see that very unique feed that Eversharp was known for. And if I remember correctly, they call this the magic feed. I don't remember exactly why they called it the magic feed. I think it was just supposed to work the way that these fins are, and the pen is supposed to keep the nib from drying out and working, much better. And the feed was supposed to be more consistent. But if I remember correctly, it's called the magic feed. I could be wrong on that though. But really, in essence, that is the pen as a whole. So things that I like about this pen. I think if you haven't already figured out the aesthetics, obviously, the pen is gorgeous. It is a very interesting design. To me, this pen was, if we're talking about the design of the pen, it was really far ahead of its time. I think it's a pen that even today is just a cool looking pen. It looks futuristic. If I was a kid, for instance, I mean, if I'm see my dad's pen, I'd be like, man, it almost looks like a spaceship or a locomotive or something. I mean, it's just a really cool design. As far as what I don't like about the pen, I mean, for me, I haven't had the pen for an extreme amount of time. I don't really have anything that I don't like. The nib that I have on this pen writes well. I did have a nib on this pen that had been damaged. I replaced that nib. I'd like to give a quick shout out to 5-Star Pens. They were awesome. I've ordered several things from them. I've ordered stuff from my Parker Vacuumatics. I've ordered Parker clips, Parker jewels, Esterbrook jewels. I've ordered now I think 2 nibs from them. They are always awesome. They get their orders shipped out so fast. I think I got this nib within like 3 days of purchasing it. That's from finding it, paying for it, and them shipping it to me. I was at my house in 3 days. So they do an awesome job. If you ever are in need of stuff, check them out. Again, it's 5-Star Pens. They do a great job. Guys, up next, the writing sample. Oh, real quick. It's going to do a sizing comparison. I'm not going to do it uncapped, just capped, so you can kind of get an idea. So there's a Pilot Metropolitan, very similar in size. And then here is a Parker 51. Again, pretty similar in size. So not a super small pen by any means. By vintage standards, I'd say a moderate size pen. And up next, guys, writing sample, and then we'll conclude from there. I'll see you guys in a moment. All right, guys, we're back, and it is time for the writing sample. So, as I said before, this is the Eversharp Skyline. To me, this is the original nib that was on this pen was somewhat usable, and I might send it off to get fixed, but it was more of a fine nib and fairly nail-like. This pen is a little bit more of a medium fine to me, and definitely can give a little bit of line variation. So the ink that I have in here is my usual, for my vintage pens, Waterman. Serenity Blue or Florida Blue, I think a lot of people still call it. All right. This nib really doesn't give back a tremendous amount of feedback, and it is pretty smooth. It's not the wettest nib. Now, when you put pressure on it, it definitely lays out more ink, as you can tell. So as far as overall line variation, there you can see some of it. So like I said, I mean, it's definitely a pen that can give you some pretty decent line variation, which I think is, another really cool thing. I mean, there you kind of, again, see it goes from more of a fine line to that right there. So, I mean, that's a pretty nice line variation. It definitely, like I said, it spits out a lot more ink when you do that. Here's another kind of, good test. It definitely springs back pretty good. So it's a fun nib to use. The pen, once I got it restored, I had to do a little bit of additional tinkering with it, obviously, than I originally was planning on doing. But it definitely restored, I think, very nicely. And once I get the other pen restored, I'll do a quick review on it. If nothing else, a review to show a writing sample. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really excited on this pen. I think it's a really cool pen. If you're getting into vintage pens, I think this is a pen that, definitely you should consider. Maybe not as the very first pen you get, especially if you have to do maintenance on it. It's a pen that I think I was a little bit worried as far as how it was going to hold up throughout the restoration. This one gave me no problems at all. We'll see how the other one does. The other one is a little bit in worse overall condition than this one was. So I think we will see how the other one does. But again, I'm excited to have this pen. I've actually got a couple of vintage reviews lined up. And then I have some modern pens that I'm going to review at some point as well. So again, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, comment down below. If you own one of these pens, tell us what color you have, how much you like it, what type of nib is it, whatever you know about it, let everybody know. I definitely would love for you guys to share that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day, evening, morning, whatever time it is you're watching this. And I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.